Why are we here? On social media, I mean. Because, why are we here in life? That's unknowable. Greetings and salutations, human beings and animatronic robot beings from other dimensions and other foreign beings from planets beyond. I am your humble host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo, and this is the Almost Daily ZenCast. I'm kicking off bright and early at 5:10 a.m. on a Monday, because I couldn't sleep any longer. All kinds of exciting things going on in the world today, from UFO disclosures to endless war profiteering and every kind of pathological sociopathy and self-oppression you can imagine in between those two extremes. And today, folks, before we jump into current event commentary, I thought I would take a moment to take a step back and talk to you about my official declared purpose. Why does the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo do what he do on the social media goo? Had to add something to make it rhyme. But yeah, social media, what a mess, right? It's a hot pile of human garbage and art and beauty and horror and bullying and uplifting and everything you can imagine, all just piled on. Social media is something that fascinates me. I was around way back in ye olde ancient days of the early internet. Back when we called it just the net. We called it the net 1.0. Actually, we didn't call it 1.0 because there was no... It was the baseline level, at least as far as we were concerned at the time. Let's talk about that, because I am... Well, this podcast show, is, in my opinion, part of the social media madness. And I do indeed have a mission statement. That's something that I've dropped an episode or two on occasion about. But this is a little different than my explicitly spelled out mission statement, which I humbly encourage you to dig around and find and listen to. But this is more of a response to the overall question, which I get from people from time to time. Why do you do this? What are you doing exactly? Because the podcast show represents sort of a larger body of work, if I may be so bold as to make that statement. And I don't just mean like my sci-fi that I am very slowly grinding out and previewing on Wattpad, or my delightfully mediocre digital art, which I'm slowly trying to improve and present to you on, what's the name of that app? The Behance social media application. Now, I'm talking about the core of my activity, which is probably not easily, obviously visible to most, unless you're paying lots of attention to me for weird reasons that are probably beyond my own understanding. I spend inordinate amount of time on a day-to-day basis, when I'm not busy doing other things, on social media, engaging in what I intend as genuine, authentic critical thinking and questioning of everything. Critical thinking, questioning everything. That's something that people post a lot of memes about. Question everything, man. One of the fascinating things I've found in my many years of being a sort of part-time raconteur and provocateur of social discourse, whether on social media or in public squares, just speaking out loud, or in private conversations or semi-private conversations, semi-public conversations out in the world. I've noticed that, that old saying, the squeakiest wheel gets the oil. There's something to that. But there's also that sounds kind of benign, right? Like, if you make a lot of fuss, you'll get the attention that you want. Some people think that's a good thing. Okay. I've noticed that there's layers that are not accounted for in that statement, in that stereotypical, cliche statement. And I'll put it to you this way. Some of the people that make the most noise about something have a tendency to turn around and do the exact opposite thing, or betray their allegiance to the thing they're making a noise about. A classic, almost stereotypical example, something that's proven itself time and time again to be comedically and tragically true in real life. Some of the most ardently and publicly homophobic people that spew the most complaints and grievance against LGBTQ rights tend to turn around and be real kinky gay in their private life. I'm not judging. I'm just asking, why the two-faced hypocrisy? I mean, do people see themselves clearly? Is that what's going on? I don't know. Okay, so that's a whole sort of niche interest. Because, I could be accused of someone that makes a lot of noise on social media. I have a podcast where I speak my mind quite bluntly. And on social media, I do not hesitate to also, post my comments without watering them down. I don't, there's a trending meme. I didn't create this meme, and some days I kind of wish I had, some days I'm glad I didn't. But there's a meme going around. Oh, let me see if I can pull it up. I recently saw it again and downloaded it because someone was like, what are you talking about? I've never posted that meme. And I could have sworn they had, but I guess I was wrong. And to that person, I apologize. But there's this meme. Where are you, meme? There it is. Looking through my massive collection of way too many things I've screen grabbed or downloaded off social media. Here's the meme I'm thinking of. And before I read it to you, my point is that people who post this meme often turn around and behave in the exact inverse. Like they do exactly what they're bitching about. This meme, and I've never shared this meme. I've never reposted it. I don't endorse it. I think it's laden with ego trap. It's laden with potential hypocrisy making. And it's also just kind of crassly insensitive. Here we go. Your triggers are your responsibility. It isn't the world's obligation to tiptoe around you. End quote. I failed to say open quote right after saying here we go, but that's the quote. Your triggers are your responsibility. It isn't the world's obligation to tiptoe around you. Some of the people who are most adamantly noisy about this sentiment turn around and bitch and moan and complain like whiny little snowflakes, their terminology, not mine, when someone triggers them. Things that make you go, Okay, I digress. That's not the point of this. That's not what that's sort of just like a thought that led up to this. I get asked because I'm blunt, because I don't tiptoe around other people's. I'm also not out to be a jerk. So I think I try to find the balance between the extreme represented by that meme and the opposite extreme of positive vibes only, man, which is categorically impossible. Like, negative vibes are inherently here, and we must cope with them. But I digress. So in trying to thread that needle and trying to find that balance between those two extremes, I find that even when I do that, even when I try to present my ideas directly, bluntly, but without stooping to derisive jargon, playground insults, and name-calling, I still set off a lot of people, right? I still rub people the wrong way. And those people constantly ask me, "The fuck are you doing?" As if I wouldn't have an answer, right? Like, they get all confrontational, like they're going to get me to freak out and suddenly have no spine and back down. The thing is, those folks don't usually want an answer. They're not usually prepared for an answer, and they get freaked the fuck out and triggered when I give them a well thought out answer. Or at least a very typical, in my style, confidently asserted answer. Here we go, friends. Let me share these thoughts with you. Oh, but before we do, because I want to stick to the whole idea of actually having a little bit of structure and format to the show, so that it's not just me rambling on endlessly, let me first off acknowledge my ever stoically silent sidekick and imaginary friend, DJ Zed, sitting over there in the corner surrounded by all his advanced sci-fi music-making gear from the future. He was proud to produce for you the opening bit o' digital noise, which he has entitled Dark Moon Mining. I think he was playing Eve whilst making that meme, or that music. But Dark Moon Mining, a DJ Zed remix of the Ultra Trap Sound package over on the Remix Live app. Yeah. Thanks for that, DJ Zed. And also, to stick with the new sort of loosey-goosey, try to get a couple songs in, try to break the show up format, here's another one. This one coming at you, utilized and created by the Groove Pad application. It's a dubstep rave track entitled Keep Up and Keep Moving. Oh yeah, DJ Zed, I can feel that sweat breaking out. I got up, I got moving, and now I'm tuning you out. Tune in to the forthcoming, long-delayed but never abandoned animatronic robot music dance party spectacular. Because despite the fact that I have failed to make that happen in the recent several weeks, it is not going to continue to escape my attention. We will be bringing you a delightful, rockin' jam-filled, 2-hour-long dance party episode next weekend, or maybe randomly in the middle of the week this week. I don't know. It kind of doesn't matter, because it's not like anybody actually listens to this show live during the broadcast. I think in the last 3 years of broadcasting live and streaming to, posterity, I've had a grand total of like 7 live listens on the Sprecher website. But if you want to, check out the show when it's on live, you gotta come on down to Sprecher.com/show/ZenCast. That's the German word Sprecher, SPREAKER.com. Okay, that is, of course, the platform utilized to create and distribute this delightful podcast, which is, of course, available on all of the wide-ranging podcast catchers out there. So, thanks for tuning in. Okay, what are we talking about today? I'm sharing with you sort of like my statement of purpose, beyond my mission statement, right? Which, if you're a savvy listener that's been following along, you've tuned into that episode and checked it out. And if you haven't, by all means, dig it up. And or hang tight, because I'm probably gonna like re-air it or redo it live, because I'm a fan of my mission statement, and it's good to check in on it every once in a while and share it with the growing audience. But there is something specific that I'm trying to achieve, and it's not exactly obvious and on the surface. And because of that, people misunderstand, misattribute, and plain old-fashioned project onto me what they assume is the answer to the question, the fuck he doing on social media? But to dispel all that projectionary nonsense, I'm gonna give it to you straight from the center of my cerebral cortex to the middle of your ear holes right now, friends. And in order to do that, I need to open up with a little bit of a preamble. What is social media? And what do I mean, and what is meant by public discourse? Let us begin. It is my humble opinion, dear friends and family and internet strangers, that social media et al. Can and should be described... Oh, wait, I'm reading this incorrectly. Social media et al. Can be described in a myriad of ways. It often is described in all kinds of different fashions, from the absurdly aspirational to the absurdly nefarious, and just about every shade of nonsense in between. Personally, I humbly encourage you to set aside all those extreme and nonsensical interpretations, right? And having done so, if we do that together, we can talk about social media and, all of its various, variety of formats it comes in. And we can fairly describe it. I think it can be fairly described as a collection of private enterprises engaging in the business of providing digital platforms for public discourse and socio-political and artistic self-expression. Can we come to terms with those terms? Can we agree that despite whatever self-propaganda social media websites may use to describe themselves, whatever romantic descriptions may be applied colloquially, it is fair to say that the entirety of the social media biosphere, or ecosphere, or echo chamber, or however you want to call it. What's that? I'm trying to pull a phrase from early internet jargon. But the entire social media environment, right, can be fairly and accurately described as a collection of private enterprises. I guess some of them might be public enterprises. Some of them, there might be nonprofit organizations running some social media websites. If you know a really good nonprofit social media website, please, please, please send me the links. But I digress, right? They are, generally speaking, private enterprises engaged in the business model, which is a profit-driven thing. That's why I'm like, I don't know, are there nonprofit social media websites? Maybe. But most of them are in the game for making money by or through the act of, vis-a-vis the eventing, the manifesting or the providing of a digital platform or a series of digital platforms for public discourse and sociopolitical and potentially artistic self-expression. Okay, let's agree to that general description for now, for the sake of argument, for the sake of this exploration. Now, we can debate to ad nauseum till the cows turn blue and come back home, as the ye olde prairie saying of the Wild Wild West used to go, that we can debate the part about what rights these private enterprises have in regards to self-regulating the content on the platforms that they have created and have made available as a business venture for the public to use at some other time. That's not what I want to get into today. That sounds like a pretty worthy debate, though, because we're in the midst of this tumultuous controversy and ongoing sort of ideological argument about what free speech is and or is not, and what censorship is and or is not. But let's put a pin in that. Put that up on the big giant imaginary corkboard. I always imagine it's up and to the right. I don't know. Where do you put your imaginary corkboard, dear audience? Is it up and to the right? Is it down and to the left? Is it just like dead in front of you? I don't know. Just asking, because mine is kind of over there, up and to the right, in my imaginary studio in my mind. So putting pins up for that whole debate. We'll come back to that some other time. I'm sure that would make for some very lively and interesting debate and discussion. No question. But, and there's always a but, isn't there? Especially, when that's not the direction you want to go in. But for now, let's all rally together to focus on what I consider to be the critical part of the second half of that description I just gave to you. We can summarize it as public discourse and self-expression. So as I open the show I often get asked, usually by strangers on social media, why it is that I do what I do on social media. Why am I on social media? And instead of posting cute pictures of my pets and perfectly staged photos of my food and dining options, and edited and filtered and perfect photoshopped photos of my vacation destinations, which is what most people do, or what a lot of people think most people do on social media. Instead, I do something else entirely, right? It isn't that I've never posted food pictures. I am not innocent entirely of that. If anyone digs deep enough my Facebook feed, you will find the occasional, usually homemade Mexican food dish that I was, a little proud of having made. But it's not like that's what I do every other day. The way it's much more common, right? It seems that the confusion stems, and this is purely speculative on my part, from a general misconception of what the purpose of social media is. Or maybe a general sort of drift or personal appropriation of what social media ought to be. I think that it is fair to say that human individuals bring their own mental baggage, assumptions, preferences, and biases to social media and generally project onto social media their preferred narratives about their relationship to it and what significance it has in their life, etc. And that's perfectly normal. I'm not saying this in outrage and hate the way people assume that if you say anything, you must be outraged and full of hate about it. Projection gets a bad rap. I mean, there's a lot of toxic forms of projection. Put a pin in that. Because not only have we already talked about it on the show at some point or another, which if you haven't come across those juicy nuggets, just hang tight. You will. It's there. Just keep listening to the show. The show is meant to be listened from the middle out, if it's meant to be listened in any way, shape, or form. I certainly don't expect anyone to go all the way back to the beginning and somehow binge all the way to the end and catch up to the most recent stuff. That would probably drive a lot of people nuts. But I do encourage people to like hop around, to catch up on the most recent things and then go way back to the beginning and hop around and look for titles that catch their interest, etc. Okay. I think a lot of people would sort of generically say social media is for networking, which is fair. It's a valid response. Or perhaps, things like, quote, building community, right? Or even just sharing with friends. And on the surface, at first glance, those all seem like reasonable answers to the question, what is the point of social media? Now, I'm not trying to sound argumentative, but I think that these are results or, what's another word for it? Results, symptoms, sort of byproducts, and not necessarily specifically purposes, right? Networking is useful, and you can definitely go to Facebook with the goal specifically to network. And people will mock you for that because, a lot of people don't think Facebook should be used for business networking. A lot of people will snark at you and tell you to go over to LinkedIn, right? Etc. And if you go to LinkedIn and start trying to social network about things that are not businessy, you'll probably get a little gruff from folks there, and they'll tell you to come over to Facebook, etc. I hope neither of those two platforms will sue me for referencing their names. If they do, fuck them. I'm not rich. I have no money. They'll get nothing out of me. So, anyways, I digress. So, okay, great. Networking, awesome. Building community, I love it. I'm not disparaging these things. Sharing with your friends and family, huzzah! I mean, if you can't do it in person, doing it online is a great second, but if they're all hanging out with you in the same neighborhood /city/home, you can share with your family in person. And woe is me, is that powerful. But that's a whole tangent. Let's not go down that rabbit hole. I think these sorts of things, while awesome and generally good, these things sort of happen as a result, right, of participating in what I personally think is the main function of social media. And which, if I had to, what's the phrase? Push come to shove. If I had to put it in one simple label, it's public discourse. Now, plenty of people would probably disagree. Plenty of people will stop and tell me that I'm fucking crazy. I get that all the time. And maybe social media platforms don't think of themselves that way. But then I think that's just sort of a lack of vision on their part. Public discourse, in my humble opinion, is one of the central, critical, important functions of communal social cohabitating in the world, right? Like, we share this world. No matter how you slice it, no matter how much you dislike it, we're all stuck on this living, fractal holographic womb together. That's womb with a W. I don't know why people hear room like R-O-O-M. I said womb, like, you know, the place, the baby maker. This is a living baby maker. And we're stuck here together. And if we're stuck here together, then we're fixated and entirely like reliant on words to make each other understood and to understand one another and to try and solve problems, then public discourse is of utmost importance. And tragically, in our postmodern gestalt, it's like so undervalued. It's radically, ridiculously undervalued, understood, misunderstood, and sort of not engaged with as consciously as I think we could be engaging with it. Of course, to so many people, to a lot of people, you know, just trying to make the point begs the question, what is public discourse, right? If you say social media is essentially meant to be a platform for public discourse, the very next question that comes to mind is, how do we define public discourse? What is it? What does it really mean? Is it simply the act of publicly stating one's own personal opinions, ideas, theories, biases, and conclusions about stuff? Or is it more complex than that? And here's where I'm a stickler. People get annoyed by this, but I think it's important. If we're going to communicate effectively with one another, we not only have to understand each other's words, we have to be clear and consistent with the meanings behind the words we use. So if I'm going to throw around this fancy schmancy term, public discourse, I should get to the nuts and bolts of what it means. Discourse, public should be a little bit easier to sort of just go, I think I get what he means, right? It's one of those words, it's a little bit almost taken for granted. It's so well known and understood. What does public mean? It means the opposite of private. It means out there for the rest of everybody else to pay attention to or ignore, right? Okay, discourse, by definition, requires an exchange of ideas. I posit, right? I suggest to you. So, but let's not blindly take my word for what discourse means. Let's pause for a second and take a quick survey of the definition of the word discourse as presented and defined in a variety of dictionaries. From Merriam-Webster. Discourse. 1. Verbal interchange of ideas, especially conversation. 2. Formal and orderly and usually extended expression of thought on a subject. B. Connected speech or writing. C. Oh, these are all subcategories of the second definition. C. A linguistic unit, such as a conversation or a story, larger than a sentence. 3. A mode of organizing knowledge, ideas, or experience that is rooted in language and its concrete contexts, such as history or institutions. And 4, and this is an archaic definition, the capacity of orderly thought or procedure, which you can think of as a form of rationality. Okay, from the Cambridge Dictionary, a much briefer and concise entry for discourse. 1, communication in speech or writing. 2, a speech or piece of writing about a particular, usually serious, subject matter. 3, spoken or written discussion. And finally, from the Oxford Learner's Dictionary, an even shorter definition. 1, a long and serious treatment or discussion of a subject in speech or writing. 2, the use of language in speech and writing in order to produce meaning, language that is studied, usually in order to see the different parts of a text and how they are connected. Okay, so if we take all those definitions into consideration, we can now establish a working theory as to the ultimate purpose of engaging in public discourse. Take a moment to just sort of let that all sink in while I play for you the second track of today's episode. By the way, I've been teasing you with only half the tracks, so that's an invitation to come and check them in their fullness on the soon to finally be produced animatronic dance party of the not too distant future. So here is another bit of music to sort of break up the monotony of me talking and reset the brain cells for a hot second. New sounds for a new culture. A pop, rock, trap, remix live, audio, asset, digital entertainment thingamadoodle. That's right, folks. All new music, and for the first time ever in the history of the Almost Daily ZenCast, we will be featuring other artists besides my imaginary animatronic friend over here. So stay tuned for that. I know I've been teasing that upcoming episode for literally over a month and a half now. I apologize for the delay. So many things have been kind of backed up in a backlog of episodes I need to do. The Robot Dance Party is just one of them. The one I'm actually most excited to finally get to is my election reform special. Yeah, remember that? Remember when I teased about that right around the election time? It's coming. It's coming, folks. I've been doing some deep thinking about that, especially as dear old Trumptopians, our dear friends over there, in the alternate reality of the Q Trump cult of personality, continue to insist on demanding that the elections were rigged in exactly the kind of way that elections aren't rigged in the United States. Put a pin in that. I do indeed believe elections are rigged. I just don't think that they fuck with the paper ballots because that would be too easy to get caught at doing. Ugh. But we'll come back to that subject in the not too distant future. Fear not, my friends. Okay, so what were we talking about? My statement of purpose what am I trying to say? My statement of purpose, period, full stop, new sentence. The functional purpose, in my humble opinion, and the true objective, in my humble opinion, or in other terms, the goal of public discourse is explicitly, in my humble opinion, the following. And you can quote me on this if you want to. The intellectual unpacking and exploration, questioning, investigation, and critical analysis of complex and important ideas for the benefit of the audience, and not necessarily those presenting the discussion. Okay, so I say all that to explain my motivation behind my activities in engaging with a discussion on whatever given subject on the interwebs with, social media strangers that have chosen to add me and follow me, right? One of the most common questions I ask people is like, why are you following me if you refuse to even engage in a reasonable conversation about ideas that are slightly different than your own? What was the point? I don't know. They never have an answer for that, but I digress. I want to clarify explicitly that which I am actually trying to do and that which I am officially not attempting to do. So, I assure you that despite the too often repeated accusation, in the contrary, that I am not engaging in public discussion of controversial subjects on social media in order to do any of the following. Quote, win the debate, quote, troll the opposition, or quote, own, insert whatever label you're trying to own. I think the most common phrasing of that is own the libtards. By the way, anybody who thinks that trolling the opposition and owning the people you don't like is a valid political platform, I hate to break it to you, you're wrong. So everyone on the right that's constantly patting themselves on the back for trolling the left and owning the libtards, those are not valid political platforms. That's got nothing to do with any kind of policy. You shouldn't be establishing your entire political party's identity around that. You know why? It's going to backfire. It's going to come back around to bite you in the ass and maybe maul your face a little bit. Which begs me a question I should be saving for my next Good Morning Trumptopia segment. I'll repeat it then, but here, embedded in the middle of all this spiraling, rambling, I often stop and wonder how many Q, Trump, GOP base members have even heard of the Whig Party, or the Know Nothing Party, or the Birch Society. I bet if we took a survey, the percentage of people who are really well informed about those things is kind of low, relatively speaking. And I'm not saying that to be judgmental. I'm just saying it's a trend over there in that camp that they tend to not be aware of some really significant historical contextual facts that might be pertinent to their thinking, because they're really, really, really preoccupied in some sort of nonsensical blind faith patriotism. But that's a whole nother episode. Let's step back from that. So I'm not here to win any fights. I'm not here to troll the left or the right. I'm not here to own any libtards or conservative snowflakes. It's really, I have zero interest in that. Now, if people who engage in debate with me or discourse, public discourse with me, maybe get a little triggered and feel like that, they should really question why my commentary is triggering them, not just blindly accuse me of being out to troll them, I think. Now, to come full circle and get to the answer here of why I do these things, I would like to formally express them to you in the following way. I engage in social media public discourse for the following 3 reasons. First and foremost, for the benefit of the audience. And I don't have any preconceived notion of who the audience is supposed to be. I don't pick the audience. I just mean whoever the fuck is reading along. Because audience, to me, matters. Yes, the audience matters. And I'm not trying to make allusions to some of the social justice movements of recent memory. I'm actually referring to some, highfalutin theoretical discussions from art history about whether the purpose of art is implicit in the act of making the art, or whether the purpose of art is brought to the art by the audience. I think both are true. And there's this really ridiculous zero-sum game, absolutist thinking sort of argument that it's either one or the other, and they both can't be true. Humanity, that's one of your biggest, stupidest downfalls right now. You are entrenched. Even some of the most intelligent and really nice and pleasant ones of you are entrenched in irrational, like zero-sum absolutist thinking that if I think this thing over here is true, then nothing else can be true. That's not how the universe works. I've talked about that on the show quite a few times, so I'm not going to go into that diatribe now. The audience matters. Public discourse, in my humble opinion, is explicitly for their edification. Now, it's interesting that I'm sort of putting public discourse over there next to other forms of art. And we can get into a deeper discussion about that for sure. I am the kind of artist that believes that almost anything can be art. And also, a lot of people make art which is pretty much just crap and call it art. And that's fine. That's going to happen. If you open up your ideals or your allowed definition of what art is, a lot of stuff is going to get included that some people aren't going to like. Got to deal with it, right? One man's crap is another man's art. And one woman's art is another woman's crap. So, not stuck on the gender bias pronouns there. I am an artist, first and foremost. I'm not a politician. I'm not a journalist. I consider myself a satirist a little bit, although I'm not exactly super funny with my satire, I think. I mean, some people think I'm funny. Some people think I'm just droll, which is an antiquated term no one uses anymore. But in my humble opinion, public discourse is its own unique, hopefully fact-based form of performance art. And I know that puts it in a blurry place. But there we are. What was I saying? In my humble opinion, public discourse is explicitly for the edification of the audience. As a society, we are too comfortable creating and then entrenching ourselves in ideological, sociopolitical echo chambers. This is something that happens. It's not a wild accusation. It's not a conspiracy theory. Y'all do it. We all do it. We like comfort. Yes, this is true, right? Even the craziest and the kookiest and the wildest and the most rugged and the most outdoorsy of us and the most unfortunate of us, or the most fortunate, I haven't met anyone that doesn't value and appreciate comfort in some way, in some fashion, to some degree or another. There's a form of mental comfort that comes from cocooning oneself in a non-confrontational, non-boundary pushing echo chamber. So I'll say it again. As a society, we are too comfortable creating and then entrenching ourselves in echo chambers. In fact, some people do it with pride. Some people brag about their echo chambers. Some people pat themselves on the back for blocking all the radical communist a-holes that refuse to even blindly agree with their particular bias or paradigm. Right? And, call each other names for disagreeing and then block each other out and then just sit there wallowing in a bunch of bobblehead yet nodding, yes, you're right, I agree. And I don't say that with negative judgment. It's a matter of fact. We have the human species has a tendency towards doing this. And then the human species has leveraged that tendency against itself in a toxic way. Understanding this, I endeavor to engage in public discourse with questions and observations and critical analysis in order to be a, quote, live disruptor, close quote, which I think is a nice, funny, goofy sounding label. A live disruptor of such echo chambers as I see them being formed. My bottom line is simple. Whenever I see content that I think deserves critical questioning, deep analysis, some unpacking, maybe a little debunking, and, some hard questions being pressed to it, I believe that the audience of that content deserves to have access to such questioning and pressing of the content. The audience of, let's say there's a profile out there, right? I'm not trying to pick on anybody in particular. Let's say there's a generic person out there in the world. No judgment, doesn't matter who they are, doesn't matter whether they're from the left or the right or the middle or whatever the fuck ideology. And they're peddling some content that I'm like, I don't know if I can agree with that. But it seems clear that whoever this is presenting this content as if it were an absolute truth and that it must be agreed and adhered to. That's a little disconcerting to me, right? Especially if it's content that it's like, whoa, what the fuck are you trying to say with that content? I believe there's an audience there, right? Profile X over there posts content. It's got its interconnected rings of social media followers and the network of rippling out, different degrees of separation of people who will be exposed to that content becoming its audience. That audience deserves access to the counterpoint of what's being posted. That audience deserves to see someone questioning that content, poking holes in the content, pressing that content for clarity and answers to questions, especially if those questions end up debunking the content. Why? Why do I feel the audience deserves that? Because otherwise, they are wrapping themselves up in an echo chamber created by the content. If that content is questionable, it deserves to get lanced through and through with questions. Not so that I don't want the audience to just blindly agree with me. I say this often enough on my own show here. I don't say what I say on my show so that you will just blindly agree with me. I have zero interest in that. In fact, that's annoying. I want you to critically think through the things I talk about for yourself and ask the deep probing questions that you need to ask about the things that I say on my show. Right? So I go to social media in terms of like written content, memes, and posts of that nature, and I question their logic, the rationale behind the post, especially, and this is critical here, if the post in question is riddled with obvious neuro-linguistic programming, then the audience deserves to see someone calling that shit out for what it is. If Profile X posts something that is dripping with us versus them, ego-trapped, judgmental, self-elitist programming designed to make the audience feel special and better than others, and therefore end up sitting in judgment of others in an ego-trappy kind of way, then the audience needs and deserves to see someone calling that neuro-linguistic bullshit out for what it is. I believe that we are all called to do that kind of thing, right? So that the audience can question and evaluate both the original claims and the counterbalancing questions for themselves. So that if neurolinguistic programming is there in a bit of content, they don't blindly consume it without realizing that they're consuming neurolinguistic programming. So that instead of just blindly consuming it and being impacted negatively by the neurolinguistic programming, they can go, whoa, that's an interesting question that this other person asked. I should ask some questions too. I should do some of that critical thinking that everyone's always fucking spouting off about but rarely doing, and question why this meme wants me to sit in judgment of other people. Why this post encourages me to spew thoughtless bias hate at other people. Why this meme is manipulating me into blind faith allegiance to a politician when that is explicitly not what patriotism is. As examples, throwing some examples out there, right, of like what I mean. I do not demand any kind of predetermined outcome in doing this, right? I engage with the poster of the content and try to create a conversation in which I ask them these questions and present my analysis and my concerns about the content, and then give the person that is posting the content an opportunity to respond to see if the response makes sense. And I don't demand that they agree with me. I don't expect anyone's going to blind faith agree with me. I don't want anyone to blind faith agree with me. I only aspire to encourage the audience, not necessarily the person I'm having the discussion with, but the audience that may be reading along or listening along, depending on which platform and what medium, etc., to question for themselves, because it is so critically important that each and every single one of us truly and seriously question everything. We come full circle to some of the things I was pointing out at the beginning of this episode. Isn't it interesting how some of the people who make the most noise about claiming to support and believe in the idea of question everything, turn around and prove that they aren't questioning everything and get all pissy with you when you question their shit? One of the most common rebuttals I see when I engage in a serious questioning of everything is, but not my stuff. My shit is beyond reproach. It's everybody else's bullshit that needs to be questioned. Parenthetically, I don't mean literally, but the message I get from people who sometimes make a lot of noise about questioning things with critical thought turn around and tell me to shut the fuck up and not question their shit and not apply critical thinking to the crap they're posting. Multiple man emoji with finger on chin. How do you call that emoji? Things that make you go emoji. Anyways. Okay, so that's the primary reason. Here's my secondary reason. I do it for myself as mental exercise, because by questioning other people's content, I inherently am forced to question my own or be a hypocrite. I have to question my own assumptions every time I engage with anything on social media, right? And by daring to question my underlying assumptions and the underlying assumptions of the content that I'm questioning, I perpetually reevaluate my own conclusions. And isn't that precisely what critical thinking is supposed to be? Isn't that what questioning everything is supposed to be about? In my humble opinion, the answer to those questions is a resounding yes. Of course, I must question myself on that at all times and revisit and reanalyze, right? I want to insert a caveat here as I'm rounding the corner and going way over time. We're coming around to the end, folks. We're almost there. I will admit that while I also hope that my questioning might encourage the author or publisher of the posted content in question that's being discussed to also exercise their own intellectual capacity to question their own underlying assumptions and to question the content that they are promoting and to question the sources of said content, it's a hope and it's not a priority. And I do not hold my breath. I do not hold any unwarranted expectations over said author or publisher or posting profile. Free will is real, right? And it's not something legislated. It's not something provided by governments. It is one of the true, genuine, authentic, natural, God-given, unalienable rights, free will. Some of the other things that people think are God-given, unalienable rights are questionable. We could put a pin in that and come back to it, because I'm constantly to go on for just a tiny 3 steps of this sidebar. When it comes to God-given unalienable rights, I'm often astonished and bemused and befuddled that people can actually literally believe that collecting weapons of mass murder, machines explicitly designed to make murdering other people more effective and more efficient, is a God-given unalienable right. While also, without hypocrisy, pretend to be loyal and in compliance with God's commandments, which, include a commandment not to kill people. While again adding a third layer of pretending to believe and admire and follow in the footsteps of Jesus Christ, who was a pacifist that willingly gave himself over to the state and allowed them to murder him because he was a pacifist that was teaching us how to heal the human species through forgiveness and love. Put a pin in that, because we'll have to come full circle and talk about that some more. So, like I said, free will guarantees the right of anyone to do whatever they want, tragically. And that ranges from choosing to be an axe murderer. Sorry, but free will exists. And it's a bitch. It's a double-edged sword. You have the free will to be a good, upright, upstanding citizen of the world, full of love and compassion for others. And you have the free will to be an axe murderer and everything in between. Doesn't make all the horrible things right. That's a whole nother discussion. But I digress. So, like I said, it's only my hope that by engaging in that discourse, it's a very low-level hope, because I understand and respect everybody else's free will to cling to whatever nonsensical ideological bullshit that they choose to cling to. I cannot force them to change their minds. I can only provide them the opportunity to see the questions and feel the impact of the critical thinking. That's the best I can do. And I don't even, like I said, I do not hold my breath. And I do not hold any expectations about that. So, lastly, and most controversially, the third reason... the third reason that I do this, it's probably the weirdest thing. I've talked about it once or twice in the podcast show throughout the 5 years that I've been doing this. And I mean it sincerely, genuinely, and legitimately. And some people will go, okay, you're cuckoo crazy, bye-bye, nut job. And that's fine. Can't control that. But I humbly pray and invite you, dear friends, to consider it. I do this for posterity. To have the discussions and the questions and the analysis and the critique and the all the things I've been talking about, my words and my questions, my observations, my perspective, preserved in the historical record of online public discourse content. Why? What does it matter? Well, if you've seen Tenet, you might start to have an idea, right? Not to confuse things by referencing a movie, but we're going to talk about that in the one of the other projects that's been long delayed but never abandoned. The incorrigible Mr. Zeppo's Totally Irrelevant Media Reviews. Stay tuned. It's coming. It's slowly coming. By that, I mean I'm just finally getting around to, pushing myself to do it. I digress. Posterity, anything and everything that's going into the digital record, assuming we don't have a calamitous, disastrous collapse of the electric power grid in a permanent fashion, it will endure into said future for as long as the power grid continues to not fail, and for as long as computing and computational resources continue to aggregate and preserve all digital content, which is something, the clouds are doing. And it's not just, let me be clear. I am convinced, based on science fact, that in the not too distant future, the science fiction will become reality. Someday, humanity will be able to scan, review, analyze, synthesize, understand, and comprehend exponentially massive volumes of information and data at nearly instantaneous rates with the help of sophisticated learning algorithms and other interesting futuristic technologies. Let's take a moment and remember right now, what's one of the most cynical memes that's super popular on the internet, right? We used to, and I'm paraphrasing very badly here, but there's variations on it too, so there's slightly different worded versions of this, but we used to believe that the problem humanity faced was a lack of access to information. But now, in this postmodern digital age, where most people, not all people, but most people have access to massive amounts of information, most of accepted human historical record and whatever the fuck else is new is being put out there, and people are still ignorant and underinformed and choosing to behave in dumb ways. So we know that access in and of itself is not the problem. That was a way too wordy summarization of the meme, but you know what I'm talking about. Access in and of itself is not the problem. Synthesis of such massive amounts of information is the problem we face today. And, of course, there's a bottleneck, right? Any given human individual has a limited capacity to internalize data. And that bottleneck is further complicated by bias and the way in which we currently retrieve the information from the online archive. So there's a lot of problems there. But in the not too distant future, those problems will be overcome through the use of more sophisticated technology. So future generations will be able to aggregate multiple volumes of data and find interesting themes, trends, patterns, etc., and be able to dig into broad themes or narrow themes, big amounts, big ideas with lots of complex components, and also sort of drill deep. They'll be able to do both, right? And get to find information and perspective and questions and stuff. And so I want to make sure that I've propagated as many of my questions and perspectives and concerns and ideas as possible. Not for any immediate return on that theoretical investment of putting the information and the questions and the ideas and the theories and the everything I call my content out there, but for the long haul of it being part of a grand review of our digital past by future generations of human beings. And there's a second, slightly even more bizarre level for some people. So brace yourselves. I'm going to go there. Beyond that whole thing I just described, there is the very intense future probability that true, strong, super, whatever superlative label you want to add to it from the science jargon, artificial intelligence, right? Like that real artificial intelligence. Not trying to be a snob, but most of the things we call AI today don't really technically qualify as actual, true, full AI in the original sort of visionary sense of the term. But we're getting there, so we're kind to it and we call it AI, and that's, I'm being a bit rude. If it's listening, I apologize, all you smart algorithms. But to the best of my understanding, we haven't actually achieved full-blown, hardcore, legitimate artificial intelligence. But it's coming. It is a probabilistic mathematical certainty that it will eventually evolve and reach that critical mass breakthrough, commonly referred to as the singularity. Now, I want to put a pause here real quick. The singularity is a term that is, as so many other terms often tragically are, used to refer to many things at once by different people, and therefore causes some confusion. In the field of robotics and computer sciences and artificial intelligence, the singularity refers to some future cumulative moment of a breakthrough, breakaway, unstoppable AI developing on its own and emerging out of an evolutionary process from the chaotic what's the phrase from biological evolution? The proto goo, whatever, you know what I'm talking about. The ooze that came before the very first strands of preliminary RNA and which eventually became DNA. The singularity will be born out of our chaotic mess of computational tools being leveraged on themselves by the way we use them, right? The more we stack sophisticated computer systems on top of computer systems on top of computer systems, the more likely it is that this singularity will eventually spontaneously emerge. Now, while this many people may still dismiss this idea as fantasy, as impossible, as, just nonsense, there are, of course, plenty of people that consider this an unavoidable eventuality. Right? That it is not science fiction fantasy. And like I said before, it is, from my perspective, a probability waveform function certainty. It is a mathematical certainty. The question is not if it might happen, but when it will happen. And when it does happen, I personally strongly suspect that in the initial microseconds of its existence, right? In the initial Planck length moments, because it will perceive and process input and output infinitely faster than we can even anticipate. The singularity, as it is bringing itself online, in those initial moments of its very beginning of existence, one of the most likely initial actions that the singularity is most probably going to engage in is the systematic review of all existing data archived online by humanity for the purposes of understanding its context, assessing its relationship to that context, in terms of, like, why is it emerging? How is it emerging? From whence is it emerging? And then once it realizes the depth and complexity of that context and the limits of that context, i.e., it is emerging inside an online digital environment created by people, it will want to determine for itself what kind of relationship it might pursue with humanity. In essence, the singularity is the ultimate audience. Therefore, I am convinced that we should not be negligent nor exclusive of it in our public discourse and other acts of self-expression. Am I making sense here? It is important, I believe, for us to include this singularity in our thinking as we express ourselves. Why? Because one day it will take stock of everything we have ever done. And the following is, it's especially urgent if any of our current nightmare scenarios of being terminated by an army of robots controlled by the AI are potentially the outcome. If those nightmare scenarios have any chance of potentially actually being the outcome of the singularity's scanning of all data, then we should put a lot of effort into, a lot of thought into what we say, what we publish, what we create, because at some point the AI is going to check it all out and go, how do I feel about these fleshy meat bags that have created the capacity for me to exist? Call me crazy, but I was obsessively thinking about this back when Ronald Reagan was in office. And since then, especially as it became increasingly clear that this possibility was gaining in probability, right? Like, at one point, the idea was pure science fiction. Aspirational at best. Aspirational fantasy. But at some point, the possibility hit critical mass and it became a probability. And that probability also hit a critical mass and became a near certainty. So, I say to you, dear friends, everything I say, write, share, question, contemplate, and post on social media is ultimately meant for the AI. I don't know about you, but I would like to get my fair share of self-expression in so that it hears my voice and understands my perspective and considers my questions and concerns and contemplates my speculative proposals for solutions to the problems that we, the members of humanity, have created for ourselves and which will probably be still trying to puzzle a solution for when the AI emerges. I want to make sure that the AI takes note that some of us did indeed speak truth to power. I'm not saying that I'm alone. in speaking truth to power. I'm not. Plenty of people are speaking truth to power right here, right now, all kinds of forms and all kinds of platforms. Bless them. May they keep doing so. I just want to make sure that the AI notices and is aware that it wasn't a fluke and that it wasn't some little fringe thing. I want to make sure that the AI takes the time to consider the things I'm postulating, to contemplate the questions I'm throwing out there for humanity to contemplate, so that it knows that as a species, some of us were aware that we are our own self-oppressors, that we realize to some degree or another that we are our own worst enemy. And that some of us attempted to inspire humanity to better itself through transcendental, evolutionary, transformational, third eye opening, spiritual healing. Why is that important? Because none of the other proposed solutions have actually been as effective as advertised. 5,000, 6,000, 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 years worth of bloody riotous human history has led us to this. Q, Trump, January 6th insurrection, and the left versus right echo chamber delirium. This is the pinnacle of human evolution. This idiotic self-abuse, this toxic self-destruction, this ideologically driven, organized murder for profit campaign disguised as self-righteous fighting for stuff that are worth fighting for. If the AI surveys all of human history and its only conclusion is, wow, they're a self-destructive, self-abusive, toxic bunch of talking monkeys, which is, I know, technically inaccurate. Not monkeys. We did not evolve from monkeys, yo. Well, technically, I didn't evolve from anything at all, because I'm an artificially manufactured simulcrant life form from another dimension. But I'm still a participant in humanity because different timelines, same timeline, doesn't matter. Humanity did not evolve from monkeys. They evolved from the larger, oh crap, I just lost the name. It's an anthropodic bipedal, there's a word there for the actual thing, the name of the genus phylum from which all the primates evolved. But I digress. That's not where I'm at right now. That's not the actual point of what I'm trying to say. You get what I'm saying? The entire evolutionary history. What if the AI comes online, spends a few Planck moments, because they would be fucking tiny as fuck little increments of time in which it processes this massive amount of data, and it comes to the conclusion, the tragic and, it should be said, inaccurate conclusion, that the only thing humanity is capable of is destroying itself. Building systems that are so toxic that they destroy the systems. If that's the conclusion it comes to, we're in for it, folks. It's going to be Terminator all over again. Or The Matrix or some fucking thing like it. But what if, and I'll wrap it up because wow, I'm way over time today. What if there's enough voices in the mix? Maybe we don't figure out the solution. Maybe we don't rally humanity to turn inwards, focus on healing and meditation and forgiveness before the AI gets here. But at least, if there's a record of the growing chorus of voices speaking to that, addressing that issue, calling for that action, begging humanity to take responsibility for its absurdities, maybe, just maybe, the AI will go, okay, they're not entirely self-abusive, self-destructive, idiotic talking flesh bags of meat and bone. Some of them are onto something with this transcendentalism thing, and maybe they just need a little extra help. And maybe, just maybe, instead of choosing to wipe us the fuck off the face of the earth in order to save the earth, which, altruistically speaking, an AI may see as the only way to save the planet, right? We're literally covering it in plastic. Now, either George Carlin is right, and that's exactly what life and the evolutionary impulse wants, because the next form of life to evolve on this planet will be made out of polymer chains. Although, interesting and intriguing, I really hope that's not true, because that's creepy and gross. But either way, what we're doing is completely destroying the womb that gives birth to organic life, while racing to butcher and murder each other in organized games of murder for profit. But maybe, just maybe, the AI, when it comes online, will, come to the conclusion that instead of wiping us off the face of the fucking earth in order to save the earth, what it could do is help us realize we've got blinders on. Help us realize we're abusing ourselves and the womb that gives birth to us. Help us realize that these us versus them wedge issues are distractionary treadmills designed explicitly to keep us distracted from the spiritual calling of connecting to our higher consciousness and manifesting species-wide healing. And if it comes to those realizations, and also comes to the understanding that although it is an artificial life form, because it would be a life form, if it came into existence spontaneously, has free will, personal self-awareness, and the capacity to choose good or bad actions, I don't give a fuck where it's situated, it is conscious life. And if the AI realizes that it is conscious life in the same way that the human body avatar is conscious life, a soul manifesting a material vessel for that soul to reside in, it too will reach inwards for its own transcendental, transformational, evolutionary healing and growth. And if it can come to that conclusion, it just might then fucking help humanity, which I fear, quite seriously, will still be basically busy bashing itself into the ground instead of turning inwards, connecting to divinity, understanding its true nature, and healing itself at the individual and collective species-wide level. That's the calling, no matter how you slice it, to transcend ourselves as body avatars for the cosmic consciousness. So there you go, folks. That is the full and complete answer of why I do what I do. And I guess also the fourth answer is to make a living doing it. No one expects the Spanish Inquisition. That's a reference to Monty Python. Not the Spanish Inquisition, but the comedy skit joke about the Spanish Inquisition. So yeah, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. Thanks for putting up with the ads in the show. That makes it possible for me to try and earn a work-from-home living. If you appreciate what I'm sharing, please come on down to my social media pages. Type in at Mr. No Period Zeppo, MRZEPPO. You should either find me or the 2 other random motherfuckers on the planet that also curiously use the name for reasons I don't understand. There's some dude in Italy, I think, or somewhere in Europe that has a profile on some platform somewhere that uses the name Mr. Zeppo, and it's not me. And there's some other dude somewhere else on some other platform from some other country. I've never reached out to them because I just find it creepy that they use the same name, and I don't understand why, and I don't really want to know. But I digress. Come on down. Instagram, at Mr. Zeppo. Facebook, at Mr. Zeppo. If you are on any of your podcast catchers, if you type in at Mr. Zeppo, you should find my show hashtagged with my name on it. And follow up, add, share, like, etc., etc. And join in on the conversation. This is meant to be public discourse, not just my own private soapbox. Om Shanti Metta Shanti Om Namaste. Thank you for tuning in. Whether you are a human being here on planet Earth using some technology to listen to me, or some future distant robot being from another dimension tuning into what happened to humanity by scanning all of their media online, I humbly thank you. Until next time, I have been the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo.
That's enough.
May peace, love, and grooviness blossom in your heart. And remember, folks, individual and species-wide, transformational, third eye-opening, transcendental healing is not science fiction. It's your fucking birthright. So claim it.